Oh, we're right there. Stay there. Keep going. Yeah, we're in. This is good.
Focus on them, they start to
make your mind go crazy.
Yeah. So then immediately drops down to third, you accelerate, and maybe then it jumps back to second. Wow. It's really cool, yeah.
So a few days before the detail, I received a call from the team at Koenigsegg asking if I could clean the Jesko in Manhattan as it completes its world tour. What makes this track version Jesko extra special is that it's the prototype, or the first of only 125 to be produced in 2020, and the next model after the extremely successful Agera RS. Now, this car was named for Christen Von Koenigsegg's father, Jesko, and starts at about $3 million, and if all goes as planned, will be the first true production car with 300 mile an hour capability. But if you want one, you're going to have to wait because they're already sold out. Likewise, buying any pre-owned Koenigsegg typically sells for 2 to 3 times, if not more, the original MSRP, so be prepared to pay up to join the 300 mile an hour club. As most of you know, cars that are this desirable, visible, and delicate tend to be the ones that are most often touched, wiped, pushed, and leaned on. So from time to time, it needs to be refreshed as any supermodel requires. More on this in a bit. So step 1 is to move it from the Manhattan Motor Cars showroom on the west side of New York City and up into its back elevator. And for the record, the car's handler, Krister, said the best place to pull or push is on the back wing supports. Now, I'm guessing that's the case because at 300 mile an hour speeds, they need to be quite strong.
Big truck coming.
Once we got outside, we borrowed the stop sign guy from the nearby construction site to help slow down traffic for our journey around the block. I've had some hairy moments with supercars in my life, but pushing a prototype down a New York City street and into a super narrow elevator will definitely wake you up in the morning. To complete the refresh of the Jesko, we were lucky enough to borrow Manhattan Motor Cars' detail bay, which was 3 floors up. Once out of the lift, and after a few quick maneuvers of the surprisingly light Jesko, we were in the wash bay to begin the cleanup before next weekend's big event in the Hamptons. Before we started the detail, we cleaned up the workspace a bit just to give us as much room as possible, as the Jesko is 6 feet 6 inches wide despite its comparatively light curb weight of just over 3,100 pounds. And if the lure of 300 miles an hour isn't enough for you, here's what makes the Koenigsegg's latest model so unique.
This is our all-new Jesko. It's the replacement of our Agera RS that holds the current world records. The name Jesko comes from Christen Von Koenigsegg's father. His name is Jesko. He helped Christian to start the company, to overwind the first financial hurdles in the beginning. Hence, he wanted to give this name as a homage to his father. Yeah, these colors come from Jesko's racing suit. He used to be a jockey, and this green, white, and gray, he had them printed on his racing suit. This car is powered with a V8, and it comes up to 1,600 horsepower on E85. Also, the weight is only 1,400 kilos, which gives it incredible power-to-weight ratio. We did the first 1-to-1. That one has power ratio 1-to-1. It will weigh 1,360 kilos and 1,360 horsepower. But this one crushes that. So this one has more horsepower than kilo with the driver inside. So this gives acceleration, is just incredible. So this is our new 9-speed gearbox, totally new developed. It's a very small package, only this size. It weighs only 80 kilos and it's 9 gears. What's special about this, it can jump from any gear to any gear almost instantaneously. Also on this car, we have rear wheel steering. So we can steer with electro servos on the rear wheels. On the motor itself, we have lightened the crankshaft and changed some things on that. And also we have removed the flywheel because we use the gearbox as a flywheel. Also, we get the questions a lot, why don't we use 4 turbochargers to get less turbo lag, for example? but that's not necessary. We use two quite big turbochargers, but we have a 20-liter carbon fiber air tank that we fill with 20 psi of pressure. And when you give throttle, it injects air into the turbocharger and also spools it up quicker, so you don't get this feeling of turbo lag or anything like that.
As you can imagine, the redesigned monocoque interior is equally insane, with an infotainment system, 9-inch touchscreen, Apple CarPlay, vents and speakers that belong in a museum, haptic touch, and of course, the 5-inch steering wheel mounted screen that stays perfectly horizontal as you turn the wheel.
You have all the information you need here in the instrument cluster, and it follows you when you turn. So when you drive and turn, it follows you. So you always have the speed and the RPMs while you drive.
As you'd expect from a supercar of this level, there are dozens of videos out there that do a great job of explaining all the innovations and gadgets within the cabin, and I'll post a video in the description if you want to dive deeper into all the tech, but I'm focused on getting this car ready for the upcoming show and its trip to South Korea in 2 weeks. Now, I've been dying to get my hands on the paint and see for myself if the detailing rumors are true, and that is, the paint is the thickest and most robust of any production vehicle on the market today. But first, it's bath time, and for all you YouTubers who think this car isn't dirty, well, you're right. Compared to last week's video of the Mercedes that hadn't been washed in 37 years, or the Eagle Talon left in the woods for many years with dead animals in it, then yeah, it's not that dirty. But none of those disgusting cars are sold for $3 million with everything calculated and inspected for perfection. And so these supercars are actually more challenging for me to clean than the abandoned vehicles themselves because I have zero margin of error and an incredibly high liability. Likewise, if I was buying a Jesko, I'd expect nothing less than perfection either. Ironically, there are actually a few spots of dirt, pebbles, light marring, and what looks like drips of wine or something red on the hood from the various shows. So here are the steps to get this supermodel back out on the runway. First step is cleaning the Unclear coated carbon fiber wheels, 20 up front and 21s in the rear. I began with a light rinse, filled the wheel bucket with Brute, and cleaned behind the rims, the calipers, then the face. Keep in mind, these are insanely light at 13 and 17 pounds respectively and cost $65,000 for the set, as it requires 50 man-hours to lay 650 individual carbon fiber pieces by hand, so I thought I would take my time and avoid any marring. Next, we rinse down the paint to remove the gravel or pebbles that get caught up in the side scoops, but more importantly, to add a lubricant to the paint. It doesn't matter if you're cleaning a Jesko or a Pinto, the keys to your paint's longevity is focusing on lubrication if you're touching, wiping, dusting, washing, and even drying the car. Always think about minimizing friction by using some type of lube, whether it be water, soap and water, spray wax, or hoseless humectant formulas that retain or preserve moisture for your paint. This is the best way to avoid the inevitable white marks, or what I call love marks, on your clear coat. The bottom line is simple: lubricate the paint when touching, or don't touch it at all. Next, we layered on some foam and boost to further lubricity and allowed the minute dust or dirt to be gently carried or floated away through the suds, dripping off the paint. Then we followed up with a healthy second rinse after 2 minutes. Next, we added a light mist of soap and used several microfiber towels in our soap bucket instead of just one wash mitt. Unlike typical wash mitts, microfiber towels tend to be softer and are only used on one car before cleaning them in a washing machine, which keeps the potential for scratching to a minimum. So instead of using just one wash mitt and lots of bucket dunking, it's better to use several microfiber towels in your bucket and then just discard them when contaminated to control the dirt. With the paint lightly agitated to remove any stuck or dried on contaminants, we rinsed one last time before drying with different microfiber towels and compressed air, but without Amo Hydrate drying aid because we're going to do a one-step polish next. To do this, we're using a yellow foam pad and light polish. The key to a successful polishing result starts with the setup. First, make sure the pad is centered on the backing plate to avoid excessive wobble. Then prime the foam pad with your polish of choice. With the initial lines down, wipe them in with your gloves so that the polish coats every foam pore. Once done, look for areas of the pad that are not fully covered or have less coverage than their adjacent spot. Add a few more dots to that specific area and continue to massage the liquid into the foam. I can imagine you think this seems excessive, but trust me, it isn't. If you skip this part, you could be chasing tick marks or blemishes in the paint for the rest of the day. Now, here's the weird or counterintuitive part. Once the pad looks and feels primed, then go over to your air gun and blow out all the liquid. If you don't have air, you can also use a microfiber towel instead. I'll explain. Once blown out, then add 2 to 3 dots of polish and then work the paint. Okay, so here's why this step is so critical. If you have some areas of the foam pad that are lubricated with polish and other areas of the pad that are not coated in polish, the uncoated areas will cut or abrade the paint differently than the primed areas. If you don't prime the pad properly, you may have an overall uneven or potentially hazy look as the result, essentially causing you to chase your tail and remove more and more clear coat in the process of removing the haze you just installed. It's a vicious and expensive cycle, especially on valuable or thin paint. Also, be sure to blow out your pad frequently based on the level of residue or clear coat coming off the paint. Now, some paints require more while others require less. In this case, the Jesko required fewer blowouts because it generated less residue. On lower portions of the car that isn't on a lift like this one here, lying on your back helps in 2 ways. First is greater stability because your arms are lower and it's easier to keep the pad face flush as you contour to the curves within the door. And second, because your eyes need to be level with the cutting edge of the pad. If your head is high and your pad is low, then you're cutting the paint blindly, which is dangerous and imprecise. You always want your eyes horizontal to the cutting edge. If you really want to learn the subtleties of correcting paint properly, check out the Amo Training Academy, where Kevin Brown and I discuss everything from the types of pads, polishes, techniques, and common mistakes to help you safely preserve your paint. But I will warn you here, the rabbit hole is extremely deep, so be prepared.
Let's say
Look at that edge.
An edge, yeah.
Pretty neat to see that.
All right.
Here is the driver's side panel 50-50 shot. Now bear in mind the entire car was not like this. It was only in logical spots of high traffic or public touching as journalists squeezed by to get into the seat, for example. And I only chose to show this spot because I had to shut off all the lights in the building and it was annoying to the other people working on the other side of the shop, so I had to pick my moments for filming.
I asked Christen and he said, there's, I think, 34 layers of paint on here. And if I can remember this properly, there's 20 layers of base coat. There's 1 layer of paint, actual paint, meaning white pearl. Then on top of that, there's another layer of champagne, which is giving it its kind of shimmering look. Then there's 3 coats of the gray, which I'll show you up there. And there's little spots of blue. It looks really beautiful. And the green, so that's 3 layers. And then 9 coats of clear coat on here. And I believe it. I've polished a lot of cars. This one in particular is very resilient. You can just feel how heavy it is. Now, to give you an example, if I were to go measure, let's say a Porsche over there, fantastic car, really good paint, that typically has anywhere from 3 to 6 mils on it. If you do, let's say, a Rolls Royce, unbelievable paint, really, really solid, way above average paint, that generally has anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 6, 7, 8, something like that in terms of mils. This has over 30. So, and in some cases even higher. So clearly this car has been painted, sanded, and going through all these steps multiple times. So I can see it and sort of feel it as I'm polishing with the experience that I have with these cars. These higher end hypercars is really spot on. I haven't seen any pigtails. I've seen nothing other than it's a show. I mean, this car in particular is designed to go to shows and people are touching and they're kind of going nuts on it. So I can understand a little bit of white marks here. I'm polishing it. It's taking to the polish really well. I'm able to sort of restore it quickly, move on, and the car looks fantastic. So from a nerd perspective, this is one of the best paints I've ever worked on.
With all the big or large areas done on the car, I switched to a 3-inch pad in machine. Again, keeping the pad face as flush to the surface as possible, especially in tight areas where a 6-inch pad is just too big to fit. Once the paint was perfected, which admittedly was not difficult, nor was it in bad condition in the first place, it just wasn't 100% flawless before we corrected it. We cleaned the light dust-covered engine and various carbon fiber pieces with Frothy in a microfiber towel. Now, on a side note, there was no way I was hitting this engine with water. 1, because it wasn't very dirty, but 2, I'm not willing to push my luck on an engine that probably costs more than my house, so a light lubricated wipe down was more than safe. Then we repeated the same steps under the front bonnet as well. After the remaining polish residue was removed and the paint back at 100% potential reflection, we added the first layer of Amo skin to protect our work and removed it with microfiber towels. While waiting for the skin to set up, we cleaned the interior, which had common driver's seat marks that were, again, pretty hard to see in this lighting, but we cleaned with lather and a microfiber towel, and the Alcantara with shag. The most common issue in the interior is similar to the exterior: finger wipes on everything. Do this a few thousand times with a couple of hundred different hands, and the material being touched is bound to get dirty, greasy, and contain a few love marks. In this case, we used a light mist of Amo spit on a microfiber towel on the center console, shifter, cup holders, vents, G meter, steering wheel, speakers, pedals, kick panels, and so on. Next up was the Fishbowl Windshield, which is probably my favorite part of the car. Yeah, I know that is a weird thing to say with all the amenities this rocket ship has, but I like the feeling of sitting in a fighter jet or an LMP1 race car, but for the street. It's a very cool sensation when you're inside. Nonetheless, I used a flexible squeegee to do most of the heavy lifting, then wipe the remaining drips with a microfiber towel. Then I finished up with a light vacuuming and spray waxed the carbon fiber door jambs, which had a ton of palm prints from people yoga posing into the cockpit without touching anything on the way in. The last step was a quick layer of cream carnauba wax for a warm glow and light reflection that makes white cars shimmer or achieve the wet look. If you're unfamiliar as I was, the Jesko has a feature on the key fob that opens the engine, the front hood, and both doors with a click of a show button. Just imagine getting gas and hitting that button. You'd stop traffic for sure. Once we were all done, we still had to ninja our way down to the showroom via a very, very tight elevator, and then down onto the street level where we pushed a $3 million prototype up a 3-lane Manhattan street in the wrong direction with a bunch of people watching from the sidewalks. No pressure whatsoever.
Oh yeah, way better.
Yes, get it up the curb.
Just up the curb so cars can go by, and then...
Once it was back in its spot inside for the next few days, you can really begin to see that last 5 to 10% of gloss achieved through a one-step polish on paint that most might consider perfect to begin with. But to a car lover's keen eye, you can see the depth and brilliance achieved for those last few percentage points that separates a great car from a concourse-winning vehicle. But let me be blunt and say it another way. For $3 million, the owner has paid for the right to have zero compromises, and that dictates that the paint be as perfect as the elegant engineering that's underneath it. For more technical information on literally every aspect of the car, visit Koenigsegg.com to geek out on all the cool features of the Jesko. And a huge thank you to Christer Holtberg and, of course, Christen Von Koenigsegg and the entire team for reaching out to prep the prototype, one of the most exciting cars I've ever detailed, and now currently ranks ¡1 in my opinion in paint composition, feel, strength, and overall depth of gloss I have ever seen on a production vehicle in my detailing career. If you get a chance to see one in person, I suggest you do it. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.